Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our Introduction to Revitalization webinar. We are guessing that if you signed up for this, you're probably not completely brand new to revitalization. In all likelihood, you have some experience with this, or you've tried it, or you've failed at it, or you're thinking about trying it. Certainly, this is a word that we've used a lot in the church, but it's a topic that's largely misunderstood because there's a lot of information out about it. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. And it's another one of those terms that we use a lot, but don't really give much context. And so that is the heart behind the webinar today, is we want to give an introduction to revitalization. Specifically, we want to talk about why it's so important. We want to talk about what does successful revitalization look like. Let's define even what we mean by the term revitalization, and what is it going to take for your church to successfully navigate through a revitalization process. So that's a little bit of an overview of where we're going to go today. And also, if you've been watching me or AJ online, you know how just excited I am about this freebie, this free giveaway we're giving today to everybody who's registered. People are probably sick of hearing about it. I don't care. I'm very excited about it. So
stick around.
Yeah, so stick around. Nothing's for sale, but we are determined to give something away to you at the end of today. So just to introduce myself, my name is Scott Ball. I'm a lead guide with the Malfers Group. We are an organization that helps churches to break through barriers and maximize their impact. We help churches and church leaders whose churches don't look like they thought they would, should, or could. And that's the heart behind everything that we do. AJ, you want to introduce yourself?
My name is AJ Matthew, always also a lead guide here at TMG. And Scott and I both just love what we do. I hope that will come across as we go through today's webinar. And if you catch us on Tuesdays regularly on TMG Live, that we're always passionate about whatever topic we're bringing to you. So there you go, a little plug for that as well. Come back every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central Time. And we're doing TMG Live on Facebook and in our church leadership community, which you can find online. And just bringing you whatever topic of the week comes to mind.
All right. But once a month, we do an in-depth dive on a topic, a webinar. That's what this is. And so let's dive straight in and not waste any of your time. So let's talk about the need for revitalization. We want to hit you with some statistics that you may or may not have heard before, but we need to be reminded of them again, even if you've heard them before, because we can't lose sight of what's most important. 95% of churches they're declining or plateaued or failing to grow evangelistically, meaning they might be growing on paper, but they're growing through shuffling sheep, right? So that means that only 5% of churches in the United States, 5%, are actually growing through primarily evangelistic growth. That's really the only statistic that we need to show that revitalization is necessary. But this is sort of the heart behind why this topic is so important. But we'll throw some more statistics at you. Only 17% of adults think that their faith is meant to be developed in a local church. There is this pervasive attitude that it can just be me and Jesus, and that's all I need. Like, I don't need anything else. I can just download a podcast. I can listen to a Spotify playlist and worship. I can buy a book and do a Bible study on my own, right? Like, I don't need a church in order to grow. And that misses the point, right? We all need community and we all need one another. And the Christian life is not meant to be lived alone, but only 17% of adults think that that's true. And when you look at evangelical numbers, you'd think they'd be largely different. They're not. It's only a third of evangelicals believe that their faith is meant to be developed in a local church. That means
that's the most alarming one to me. Whenever we talk about these stats, Scott, is that believers don't get it either. And I don't think they're necessarily pushing back on it. I don't think they understand. I just don't think they've necessarily been taught the necessity and the benefits of being in community and developing their faith. So
right at the personal level, that means that roughly 2/3 of the people at your church might be kind of feeling like, I'm not so sure how important church is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that gets evidenced when they choose travel ball over showing up at church on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
people make these choices.
And that's not, I don't necessarily say that's a failure of them personally. That's a failure of the church in general and at large in, just teaching the body what what the Christian life is about. So,
Well, going back to revitalization, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
mm-hmm.
If we're stuck and we're not showing to provide any real disciple making value, like I'm not actually growing my faith by being more involved in church, why would it be important to me?
Yeah.
Right. So, all right, by
All this
2020,
stuff is connected.
they're all by 2020, only 15% of Americans will actually be in a church any given Sunday. That's a projection by David Olson, and the numbers get worse over the next decade after that. So that means 40%. Barna has found that, and it's been consistent actually in Pew and every research Gallup all across the board, around 40% of Americans claim to be regular churchgoers, but the actual people in church on a given Sunday numbers are drastically different than the self-reported, yes, I go to church, which is 40%, but the actual numbers are closer to 15% that actually show up.
Yeah. You might see similar comparisons between your member roll and your weekly attendance.
Weekly attendance, yeah. Lifeway found 60% of young Christians aged 16 to 29 are leaving the church. Used to be that was common, but they would come back when they had kids. That's what's different. It's lots of times now young people are leaving the church and then they're not coming back when they have kids. That's new. The Southern Baptist Convention has lost more than 1 million members in the last decade. They lost over 236,000 members in 2014 alone in just 1 year. And if you're Baptist, you might already know this number, but that's alarming. The SBC is the largest denomination in the U.S. and they're not Protestant denomination, and they're not going to lose that status anytime soon. But the pace at which they've been losing members is not something to ignore. And there's conflicting sources, so that's why we have a range here. But somewhere is as few as no less than 4,000, but as many as 9,000 churches are closing every single year, and about 4,000 churches are being planted each year. So at best, we're just replacing the ones that are closing, but that's not up with population growth. The estimates are that we would need 8,000 churches planted every year just to keep up with population growth and to reverse the tide of churches closing. So it's a desperate situation. We need church planting for sure because the population is growing, but we need church revitalization because we can't see this many churches close. It's not acceptable. I know that our team here at TMG is not okay with this number, and it's what gets us up every morning. I was working till 1:30 in the morning last night on this thing I'm very excited about for you guys. And why would I do that? It's because this number is unacceptable to me.
Yeah.
And what keeps you up at night? What would you work late into the night for? For us, it's this. It's wanting to change this. AJ, any thoughts?
It's a big task, but we have a big God. So we're confident that, bringing resources and meeting together like this. There's a lot of folks online watching this, and I believe you're here because there's something has pricked your soul into making a change, doing something different. You wouldn't be here otherwise. So to me, that's encouraging. That's exciting.
Yeah. But here, that's sort of the macro reality. Let's talk about your reality. Your reality is, it might be, I don't want to assume, but very likely if you're on this webinar, you're not sure if your community knows that you're there and that you care. I know that this is a struggle, especially for some older churches that, even when they were built 50 years ago, the buildings were built 50 years ago, they were in a neighborhood that was alive and vibrant. Now they're in a neighborhood that's declining. And so people just physically don't even know that the church exists because traffic patterns have shifted and the culture of the church isn't one to get out there. And so as a result, they're literally hidden in their communities physically, but they're also functionally hidden because they don't have an externally focused culture. So you're not sure if your community knows that you're there and that you care. You're always chasing new ideas, but there seem to be almost no results. We see this a lot. We get contacted by churches all the time that say, well, we've tried this new outreach. We did the trunk or treat. We opened this food pantry. We did this. We changed our name. We launched a new website. Like, they talk about all of these external things that they've done, and then they get frustrated when there's very few results from that. And there's a reason for that, which we'll talk about later in some of the training that we're giving away. But churches feel frustrated because they feel like they're making external changes, but they're not seeing any real results from those. You might have a situation where new people visit the church, but very few ever come back, and you're not sure why. Like, where was the breakdown? Was it something that you said in the sermon that was offensive, or was it people didn't like the building? Was it the people were rude? Was it in the follow-up process? So was it the kids program? Like, where was the breakdown? And you're not quite sure, and you're frustrated by that. People who have been attending the church for a long time are leaving. And some of those folks are packing up and going to the big church down the street that's got the new shiny thing, and they're frustrated by that. But others are leaving your church and they're just not going to church at all anymore. They just gave up on church. And that's really frustrating. You might be feeling like you're doing a lot of good stuff, but it doesn't seem to be leading to making and maturing disciples. Like, when you look at if what we're supposed to be doing is making disciples, and you look at all the things the church is doing, at the end result of that, there's not much discipleship happening. Maybe good relationships, good fellowship, but is that really disciples being made? And is that really new disciples being made? Like, is that really happening at your church? So if any of those things describe your reality, I know we talked about the big numbers, but the big numbers are just the accumulation of lots of individual churches, individual reality. And the things that I just listed are the things that we hear, AJ, all the time from churches that they're experiencing. So if that describes your reality, revitalization might be the solution. I don't know if is there a tool somewhere? Can people do like a digital hand raise? Is that a thing on these webinars, AJ? I don't even know.
We have a Q&A box there. If you at the bottom of your window there, you can click on Q&A and ask questions there, and we'll be glad to. And apparently there is a hand raise too, because it just started working and people were popping up with their hand raised. So
thank you. So if this describes your reality, maybe not all of those things, but if one or two of those things, man, if that describes your reality, raise your hand. Oh man, we got lots. My screen just filled up with hands being raised. Good. Okay, I'm glad. All right, this is why we're doing this webinar. Thank you. Praise. Actually, you know what, AJ? Like, we just saw a whole bunch of hands being raised. Behind those hands being raised, that clicking is people who are frustrated and tired. Like, before we go any further, will you just pray for us and pray for these churches? Because I hope. Sorry, I'm about to cry. I really hope that the stuff we've been working on helps you. Like, I'm tired of you guys. Sorry. I'm tired of you guys being frustrated. AJ, will you pray for these churches?
Yeah, let's do that. Lord, thank you for this time that we can be together with our brothers and sisters across the country, across the world. God, we're thankful that we have this technology that we can connect. God, I thank you for the passion that you've put on our hearts here to help the church, to create resources for the church. And I'm thankful for the passion that you've put on all their hearts to be the church, to lead the church, to make disciples, Lord, to do what you've called us to do. God, we thank you for who you are, what you've done for us, the vision that you have for the church, for the plans that you have for us for the future. We thank you. God, I pray that you'll bless each of these people today, Lord, with fresh inspiration, fresh vision to make the changes that need to be made in their churches, Lord, that they can reach the world with the name of Jesus, that hearts will be changed, souls will be saved. God, we thank you, love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right. Good. Well, I'm glad that this applies to a lot of folks here. So, revitalization versus replanting. So one of the challenges lately has been that there's been a lot of mixing of these terms, revitalization and replanting, and I don't think it's been very helpful. I think it's made things very confusing, and they're not the same thing. So I wanted to take just a couple of minutes to start to describe the difference between the two, because there's a very clear difference between the two. And one path is good for certain churches and another path is better for other churches. So Let's briefly describe that. So let's define what we mean by revitalization. Revitalization is the process of transforming a declining church with unhealthy habits into an externally focused congregation that experiences healthy, sustainable growth. Very simply, if you wanted to pick one word out of that definition, it would be transformation. We're taking a church that is declining, that's plateaued, that even it might be growing, but only through transfer growth, and we're trying to transform the culture of that church, so that we're making and maturing disciples, so that you're experiencing healthy, sustainable growth. That's what revitalization is. It's literally taking a plant that has a little bit of life left in it. And if you've ever seen someone, there's going to be a lot of plant metaphors today, unintentionally, AJ, today. Um, but there's someone taking something that still has a little bit of life in it. You know those people, right? Who can water it and nurture it and bring it back to life. That's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the prerequisites for revitalization? First, you have to have a desire to change. We think that this is an easy one to check off. We think especially if you're on this webinar, you want to change. You wouldn't have signed up for this if you didn't. We think most churches want to change, but it is important that there be a desire to change. If there's no desire to change, then revitalization and replanting both are not going to work, because they both require sacrifice. And if you're not willing to change, you're not going to engage in the sacrifice. Second thing you're going to need is funds to change. That doesn't mean you're going to use funds necessarily to work with an outside group, although we would really advocate for that, whether it was us or someone else. But you're going to need funds to change, because there are going to be external things you're going to need to change in all likelihood, and those things cost money. So if you have no budget at all, it's going to impact your revitalization process a little bit. Doesn't mean you can't change, but it does mean it's going to be harder for you. Having funds to change doesn't mean you have to have it all in your bank account as a church right now, but maybe you've got a couple of people in your church who would be willing to fund certain projects. And so that would count too. Any thoughts on that? I'm not trying to make a big deal about the money, but it's kind of a reality of the process is you're going to need some money to do some things.
Yeah, it is an unfortunate reality. I mean, most churches that are in that position are likely to have aging buildings, with aging air conditioning systems and roofs and carpet and just all that stuff, because those are the things that begin to slip as the congregation gets smaller, and they continue to realign the budget. So whenever you decide to make a change, those are the unfortunate realities of probably where you are. So I don't know. You can go on and on talking about money and ministry, but it does take money, organizationally to do organizational ministry. So it's there. But you know what? The Lord could provide in a lot of ways.
A lot of ways, right? The last thing, and this is really important. This is one of the key distinctions between revitalization and replanting. So I really want you to catch on to this. You need critical mass for change. Critical mass. So that means you need at least 30 to 50 engaged members. By engaged, I mean willing to do work. Not that they show up on a Sunday morning, but you need about at least 30. It'd be great if you had 50 people in your church who would be willing to do some kind of a work. They might be aging and old. They might not be able to do much work, but if they can do anything at all to help, that counts. So you need critical mass for change. It takes people. It takes money. It takes a desire. It takes funds, and it takes manpower. And if you don't have that manpower, you're not going to be able to do it. Like I'm just being honest with you. If you don't have people, the critical mass to undergo a revitalization process, then revitalization is not the option for you. Replanting is more likely the option for you, which we'll talk about here in just a second. There's some other things that, not just wanting to change, having money and having people is not enough to just snap your fingers and make revitalization happen. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but these are sort of prerequisites. You got to have at least these things before you can even think about doing revitalization. So let's define replanting. Replanting is leveraging the assets of a dead or functionally dead. I don't even need to explain that. You know what functionally dead means. A dead or a functionally dead church to create a new congregation in the same space, but generally with new leadership, new structures, and a new name. It's a new church. Replanting means a new church. That's the big takeaway. Transformation is revitalization. Replanting is brand new. It's taking the pot, taking out the dead plant, using the same pot and putting a new one in. It is a new church. It's a new church. It's a new church. That's what we mean by replanting. I want to be really clear about that because there's a lot of confusion on the internet about what replanting is, and it means you're putting in a new church. You're recycling as much as you can into a new church. So some prerequisites for replanting. You have to have a willingness to let go, like let go of all of it. Let go the bylaws, let go the name, let go the leadership structures, let go the money, let go everything. It's all you're going to have to let it all go. Like I know that's really hard to say, and it might be really hard to hear if your church is considering replanting, but that's what's required. You have to be willing to let go of all of those things. It's going to require a leadership transition. That's maybe the hardest thing to say. That if you've been the pastor of this church for 40 years or 30 years or 25 years, and you've decided replanting is the option, in 99.999% of the cases, that means you're going to have to step down from the church and create a plan for that transition to a church planting pastor or replanting pastor who's going to take the mantle and lead the new organization. And it's ideal for churches under 30 people. So if your church is averaging under 30 in attendance, and basically all you have left is assets, then it's time to consider replanting. So replanting, by the way, can look like starting a new church, or it can look like becoming a campus of an existing church. So those would be the two options. But in any case, it's a new organization. It's either a new campus of a church or it's a brand new church. So any additional thoughts here, AJ, before I move on?
There's things that cross over between the two, and there's things that don't. So you can certainly, if you're moving into a replant, a lot of the components of revitalization are there because you're building a healthy church. So regardless of whether you're changing an existing church into a healthy church or you're starting basically from scratch a new church with the intent on it being healthy, there are still components that cross over. It's kind of more of the beginning is significantly
like
different
process, which again is going to be a little bit different. But the biggest thing is when you're replanting a church, you're starting from you have to think of it as we're starting from scratch. The benefit you have over just a traditional church plant is you might actually have a building and funds, which typically you don't have when you're a church plant. When you're a brand new plant, you don't have any money and you don't have any place to meet. So basically, you're a church plant with a head start. That's what you are, unless you're becoming a campus of another church. Okay. All right. So what should you do? Which path is right for you? You need to own your stage. That's what you need to do. If you look at those prerequisites and you go, you know what? We've got a little bit of money. We've got enough people. Listen, we could do this. Own your stage. Like take that mantle on and go, we're going to do this. Like now's the time. 2019 is the year. We're going to do this. No more excuses. Own that. If you're a church, you looked at it and you go, we're less than 30 people. Like we can't, there's no way we're turning this thing around. You got to own that stage too. You got to put that thing on your shoulders and go, all right, it's going to be hard work. People are going to be mad or hurt or sad. But you're not serving anyone and you're certainly not helping the kingdom if you don't own that stage. I like this quote. I know some people don't love Andy Stanley right now, and that's okay. But this quote is good. A leader is someone who has the courage to say publicly what everybody else is saying privately. That's true. You already know in your heart if revitalization or replanting is the right choice for you. Like you don't need me to tell you that. You just looked at the options and you go, okay, I know what we need to do. And it's time for you to have the courage to say that
Mm-hmm.
and make a commitment to that. So I'm trying to serve you by telling you the truth. Like, you got to make a decision, right? All right.
Leaders lead.
Leaders lead. Defining successful revitalization. What does winning look like? So if we were to do this, if we were to revitalize our church, what would the end of that look like? Well, let's start with what it isn't. One extreme, people, and we all want to get there, right? Like, in our minds, we think, man, I'm going to revitalize my church and it's going to be big and it's going to be growing and it's going to be this and that. That's an extreme, and it could happen. It'd be amazing if it did, but that's not in all likelihood what's going to happen. Becoming a mega church and growing fast is not likely to be the fruit of a revitalization process for you. I just want to go ahead and pop that bubble. That is not what happens. People call us and they say, we want to work with an Alphas group. We want to work with you guys and show me what can happen. Show me big results fast. Well, that's not a realistic expectation for any church. Okay. There's another extreme, but this is really common, which is, so lots of times we'll get called by churches that have already done a revitalization process. And what they mean by that is they made external changes. We changed the carpet, we changed the music, we changed the website, we did some renovations, but you didn't address the systemic and the cultural issues that are within your church that are dysfunctional. That's not revitalization. You have to address the systemic and cultural dysfunction in your church in order for it to be a successful revitalization process. Just changing the curtains does not change the fact that it doesn't change what's happening internally that's wrong and not working, right? So don't think that we're going to grow fast and become a mega church. Also, don't think, well, we can be revitalized by just making some superficial changes. That's not going to work. Okay. So here are some markers of successful revitalization. This is how you know it's working. Number one, you're actually making and maturing disciples. I know that might sound like a pie in the sky, abstract concept, but it's really not. You can actually measure that. That's one of the things that we do when we work with a church is we define disciple-making measures that are not just rear ends and seats. We're trying to find qualitative measures that we can use to make sure that you're actually making and maturing disciples, right? So we should see that in our good revitalization process. Your community should know that you're there and that you care. I don't care where your building is. It might be in the most inconvenient part of your city or town or rural area. It does not matter. If you're doing your job and if we're revitalizing the right way, your community is going to know you're there and that you care. Mm-hmm. They are. So that means evangelism is happening in personal evangelism, in outreach events, in outreach services and relationships with the community. Because you have a culture of evangelism, an externally focused culture in your church. And you'll experience healthy, sustainable growth because healthy things grow. I'm not saying it'll be fast growth. Lots of times things that grow fast are cancer. It's not necessarily a good thing, right? Sometimes things grow and it's healthy. I mean, right? Like we see Acts chapter 2 or Acts chapter 1, Pentecost, right? That grew fast and that was not cancer, obviously. But that's very rare. What we typically see in healthy things is that they grow in a sustainable and healthy way.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's how God has designed the universe. When things are healthy, they grow. So we expect that you would see that. So some will say, well, your church doesn't need to grow to be healthy. We actually would say that's not true.
Yeah.
You don't have to see big growth or fast growth to be healthy. You don't have to be a mega church to be healthy. You can be still a small or mid-sized church and be healthy, but you should be growing because healthy things grow.
Something proportional to where you are and, what your population is, what your increase of population is. I mean, these are all things that help you have at least establish some potential markers for what should our growth level be like. So, yeah. And a lot of the components of revitalizing a church and structurally setting it up to be healthy are systems that are in place that are scalable so that growth can happen without causing major pain points in whatever intervals you hit.
Yeah, that's good. I just want to show you that it is possible. I did not ask these churches permission, by the way, to share their information, but I'm sure they'll be fine with it. I just want you to know that like this isn't just a pilot. These are not random examples, by the way. Like sometimes you'll go on these things and they'll be like, and here's my two best cases. These are two of the most recent churches that I personally worked with. AJ, I could have done the same thing with churches he's worked with, but I put the PowerPoint together, so it gets to be my church. And so these are not like exceptional churches. They're just churches. Okay. So the Fellowship's a church in the Boston area. They're up 55% in attendance from 180 to 280. And that was in the span of less than a year. Now, it's been about 2 years since they started their process. And what I don't have in the slides is they actually lost people at the beginning of their process, which can be very scary, but also not uncommon. They lost people at first, but now they're up 55% in attendance, average worship attendance, in the last less than a year, like 9 months or so, which is crazy. They up 21% in Easter attendance year over year, last year to this year. But the thing I care about in what we do is that they're healthy. I don't care about the numbers because the numbers come. I care that they're healthy, and they are a healthy church, and I love them so dearly. And if I think about them too much, I'll start crying again. So I won't do that. First Baptist Right City. This is a very small church, or what you might think is really small. They had 15 people attended their first ever. They've never hosted a newcomer event at their church, but they did one in March. And 15 people came, and every single one of those people are now regular attenders. And listen, they were up 32% in Easter attendance year over year. Last year it was 65 people. They're a smaller church. They might be just like you. And this past year, this just a few weeks ago, 86 people. That's a big jump for where they're at and for the size that they are. I don't dismiss that. That's amazing. What's even better is I just got a text from the pastor who might be watching this as a replay. Hi, Chad. They're sustaining that in the 80s number now since Easter, which is crazy. So again, I don't care about the numbers. What I care about is that they're healthy. They're moving in the right direction. Do they have all their ducks in a row? No. He's just as excited about this webinar as you are because he's still hungry to learn and to grow and to get better as a pastor. But he's amazing. And if you ever talk to me, I'll always send Chad as a reference to you, which I don't think he minds talking with you guys about what we do. But I love the work, and I love that it's proof. You don't have to be a big church to have a big impact. Just ask First Baptist Right City.
One of the things that you see, because I mean, I know a lot of the folks up there at Fellowship, and then a lot of course, churches that I've worked with. You begin to see in a healthy church an attitude change and an excitement change, and the pastors and the lay leaders. You begin to see. I mean, their faces brighten. You know what I mean, Sky? Whenever we talk with these folks and we see them on Facebook or Instagram and all this stuff, whenever they really kind of make that turn, I mean, they've gone through the process and they're, I think, starting to see a little bit of change happen. Maybe that low-hanging fruit at least is showing them that things are not going to be the same this time. We're actually making some progress. You start to see this new excitement and anticipation of what's going to be coming up next. And I think that breeds additional excitement and change. And I just think that that attitude change and that excitement is a marker of a healthy church, because probably a lot of you guys, you're there on Sunday, you're talking to people, and a lot of places when we first go in there, it's like a funeral, because there's death being experienced in and around the church, and it has that feeling to it. It's just kind of, people are just kind of there. There's not a lot of life, and we see that when we begin. We first start meeting with the strategic leadership teams that we work with, and then even throughout the process, month after month that we're there and we're making plans and starting to execute on things. The conversations just change. People brighten up. I mean, just this week, I was with the church last weekend in the Southeast, and there's been like these emails going back and forth between the pastorate and a couple of leaders. We were talking about community outreach, and it's just kind of I feel like we turned a corner this last weekend, and I'm so excited about this email chain going back and forth now because ideas are just starting to flow, and people are like, "Oh, wow, that's a great idea. And what about this? And what about this?" And these are conversations that dying churches aren't having. I mean, sometimes they're grasping at straws and they're like, what if we tried this? Let's, it's kind of a desperation move instead of an anticipation move.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the unquantifiable thing. What's that?
In the training we're giving away, we call it a trick play, right? I got to get all my yards in one play.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work in football very rarely. And it doesn't work in revitalization either. So we're not trying to make this a sales pitch for us in any way. What I'm trying to show you is that it's possible. Like your church can
there's a future. There's a better future.
Like your church can change. Again, these are not random churches or like selected churches. These are just churches we recently worked with.
Mm-hmm. So, and there's no golden bullet either. I don't want this to turn like the Malfors group has a secret and they're going to tell us one thing and then boom, there's not golden bullet, silver bullet. Got my Lone Ranger thing wrong there.
Our friend Dale Sellers at 95 Network says there's no silver bullet and we probably shouldn't be giving bullets to pastors anyway.
But yeah, this is not a one and done thing.
No, it's hard work. All right. So what's needed for revitalization? So there's no silver bullet. So what is needed? What are we going to need to do? First of all, it's going to take time. That's the biggest thing that you're going to need. You're going to need 3 to 6 months for planning. You shouldn't take more than 6 months for planning. Okay. 3 to 6 months, no longer than that. We've seen churches, and we'll talk about this in the training we're giving away, take 2 years for planning. Nothing changes. People are frustrated and they give up, right? So 3 to 6 months, stick to that timeline. 1 year for implementation. So you're going to be implementing changes perpetually, but the first year of implementation is critically important. It's like the gestation period for a baby, right? Like there's a lot of activity and things going on in the womb. And it doesn't mean your body stops growing once you're born. Obviously you keep growing, right? But those first critical months, those first 9 months are really critical. Same thing's true for your revitalization process. That first year of implementation is really critical and requires a lot of extra energy and attention and focus. It's going to take 3 years to see deep change. That's just a fact.
Mm-hmm.
You've probably heard that before, but we've seen that to be true. You're going to see some changes immediately. You're going to see some changes over time in that first year, but 3 years to see deep change. So if you're not willing
we're going well beyond 3 years whenever, throughout this process, the goal of the process continues on, obviously, in perpetuity. So don't misread this now and go, okay, if we can just do something different for 3 years, then we can go back to the way we are. No,
right.
That's not what we're saying. But long-range vision is longer than 3 years too. So
sure. But when you get 3 years in, you'll look back and go, oh my goodness, we're not the same church that we were.
Definitely.
It takes that long to go. We're a completely different place now.
Mm-hmm.
The first year, it's still going to feel like you're kind of this and you're kind of that. But within 3 years, you'll start going, okay, we are a completely different place.
Yeah.
All right. It's going to take leadership. Leadership. That's you. If you're on this webinar and you've invested now already 40 minutes into this sucker, like it's going to take you. It's a hands-on process, and it will not happen on autopilot. The biggest failure that we see is churches start fast and then bail when they don't get a result in 5 minutes.
Mm.
It doesn't happen quickly. Yeah. We already just said that. So it takes a hands-on process. It will not happen on autopilot. You have to hand hold it the whole time. It's like a garden, like setting up your garden in the spring. You can't just leave it for the rest of the summer and expect a harvest, right? Like it needs watering. You got to get rid of the weeds. You got to get rid of the pests. You got to pluck the fruit that starts to mature. Otherwise you're not going to have more, right? Like constant attention. Okay. And that's leadership. And you need a process. So don't expect results if you don't commit to a process. That's the other big failure we see is churches try a scattershot approach at revitalization. Let's do a little work on our mission. Let's do a little bit of work on our vision. Let's change some external things. Let's make some facility adjustments. Let's fire our pastor who's old and crusty and hire a new one that has better hair and better genes, right? Like those things are not revitalization and they're not going to work. You have to stick to a process. AJ just said there's no silver bullet. If there is one, there is a silver bullet. You know what it is? Hard work. That's what it is. It's hard work and dedication, relentless dedication to a process. So you might be wondering, what process should we use? That's kind of outside the scope of this training. But the good news is, for this webinar, I mean, but the good news is the thing that I've been teasing for days and weeks and online is that we're going to walk you through that process and what it's going to take through initially through a free training that we are releasing to you tomorrow. So we've got a little video here. It's very short, it's just a couple minutes, kind of explaining to you how we want to help you. All right. By the way, you might want to, the volume's a little low on this video, so you might want to crank up your volume for just a minute while this is playing. Your church can experience a breakthrough. Over the next 4 lessons, you're going to gain practical knowledge that will help your church prepare for revitalization. We want to help your church get ready for a breakthrough. So here's a breakdown of the 4 lessons in this course. Lesson 1, the revitalizing pastor. This lesson will walk you through the profile of successful revitalizing pastors, and it will give you tips and encouragement if there are gaps between where you are right now and in your leadership and what you'll need to take your church to the next level. Lesson 2 is barriers to revitalization. People like to say that revitalization doesn't happen because churches don't want to change. We think it's more nuanced than that. We believe your church does want to change, but there are 3 fundamental barriers that keep most churches from experiencing a breakthrough, and we're going to walk you through all 3. Lesson 3 is spiritual formation and revitalization. The process of changing, revitalization, and experiencing a breakthrough is fundamentally a spiritual journey, not a strategic one. If your church is going to transform, you're going to encounter spiritual opposition. This lesson walks you through 4 action steps you can take to help get your church spiritually ready for the process. Lesson 4, the last lesson, is a framework for revitalization. Churches struggle to change because they lack a process for revitalization. This lesson will walk you through a framework you can use on your own or with a guide so that your church can experience a breakthrough. We'll also talk about the potholes to look out for in a DIY revitalization process. We hope you're ready to see your church experience a breakthrough. We hope you're ready for change. We hope you're excited about preparing your church for revitalization. We are. Keep going through the course. The journey is just beginning. All right, man. Oops. No, don't restart the video. Go to the next slide. There we go. All right. So we're so excited because we can't in a 1-hour webinar walk you through how to prepare your church for revitalization. We certainly can't walk you through a revitalization process in an hour. We're excited that we have been developing a resource that's going to help you with this. And we told you there's no sales pitch today. There is no sales pitch today for anything. We are giving away a free course called Preparing Your Church for Revitalization. It's the 4 lessons that I just walked through in that video. So the Revitalizing Pastor, it includes 2 leadership assessments that you can use that sort of tie along with the video lesson talking about here's what works for revitalizing pastors. Here are some of the challenges for pastors that maybe don't have certain character qualities or temperament issues. So we walk through all that. The second lesson is on barriers to revitalization, and you will actually give away like a team discussion guide in there so you can help to identify which of those 3 barriers are really holding you back right now. The third lesson is on spiritual formation. AJ leads that lesson, and it's about how to create the right spiritual climate in your church. We also have a team exercise you can use with your leadership team to begin that process of creating the right spiritual climate in your church. And then the fourth lesson is a framework for revitalization. So it does walk you through, here are the steps you're going to need to take. Here's some potholes to look out for. As you might have figured out, we are going to have a full course that releases this fall. And it's going to walk you through our whole process that we work with churches, that we do one-on-one with churches. One of the things that bothers us is that for most churches that want help can't afford help. And we think that that's unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So we have been desperately trying to find a low-cost option that is the best that we could do short of being on site with you. If we can't be on site with you, what could we do? And it's this. Mm-hmm. So we're not in this to make a buck. You might not know this, but Malphurs Group is a 501c3 organization or nonprofit. And so we have nonprofit intentions. Our goal is to help you. So the free course launches tomorrow. You'll get an email. You're going to have first access. We will send a replay to everybody else, but we're going to send that on Thursday. We're only this first on tomorrow, Wednesday, you're going to have first crack at this free course. And we're looking for your feedback. We'd love for you to register for it. Again, it's completely free. And that doesn't sign you up for the full course. It doesn't commit you to anything else. It's just there to help you. And I'm very excited about that. AJ, anything you want to add to that? And then we promised a lengthy Q&A time. And so we need to get that if we're going to do it.
Yeah, I certainly echo your excitement about it, Scott. I mean, we're excited about changing our own organization to better help you guys. So, from our ministry to yours, I'm excited that we're able to launch a new resource like this, and hopefully just reach more people just like you. So the Lord has put that on our heart over the last many years now, to make this nonprofit conversion so that we could be a greater ministry resource to churches like yours that are likely smaller, likely under 500 a week in attendance, because more and more of you are reaching out to us. And we don't want money to be a barrier to you going through a quality process and getting your church healthy and making disciples. So we're making every effort on our end to be able to.
I was just going to say, and now we don't want even your lack of ability to bring us on site to be a barrier to you getting help.
Yep. We're just trying to develop low cost opportunities. So, yeah.
So,
okay.
You'll have access to all 4 of those lessons right away. So like as soon as you sign up tomorrow, the registration link goes out tomorrow morning. You'll get to hop on there, set up your account for free, and you'll have access to all 4 of those lessons. And each lesson is between 7 and 12-ish minutes long. So they're not crazy long, but they got a lot of good information.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what are your questions about revitalization that we can answer for you? Or if you have questions about what the Church Revitalization University resource is going to be like, you can ask questions about that as well.
Yeah. So there's a Q&A option there at the bottom of your webinar window that you're welcome to ask any questions on there. As we typically see, Scott, there are no 2 churches alike, and there is no necessarily easy situations going on. And so some of the feedback that we've already received here this morning are some very challenging situations that pastors and leaders are facing in the church. So, Charles, I sent Charles an email to connect with us, and that goes for any of you. You can email us at leadership@malphursgroup.com. That's leadership@malphursgroup.com with any questions that you want to talk about, because everybody has a unique situation. So Charles has been working on a revitalization process with his church for quite a while, and they're running about 60, he said. His main question was, since they've been kind of working on this, he's only been there a few years though, Scott, and is wondering if maybe replant is going to be where they're at. And if that's the case, does he need to go? So talk about having to ask a tough question of yourself. I'm not sure we have enough information to be able to answer that live, Charles. So that's why I told you to follow up with us.
50 to 60 though, right? On his attendance.
60. Yeah.
That's generally too many people for a replant. If people are just totally not interested in helping and they don't want to do anything and they're completely resistant to change, you could look at becoming a campus of a different church. But I've seen that go south real fast too. What end up happening is they'll just kick you out. They'll say you're the problem, because sometimes churches just want the church to outlive them. I got a friend, Michael Petty. He says that. He says some of these people, they just want the church to outlive them. They want them to be buried by the church, and then whatever happens after that,
They don't
is
care.
fine.
Yep.
They don't. And so you gotta just kind of navigate that. But my encouragement would be, if you've got the critical mass for a process, my question would be, how much of have you just done things, change external things, or have we actually committed to a process, like step 1, step 2, step 3? And if the answer to that is no, that might be the next thing that I would look at doing. And again, chat with us. If you've got resources to work with us or any other group, that can often signal to the church, this is different. Yeah. This time it's different.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of the questions there, not knowing exactly what's been worked on over the last few years. So just, there are a lot of questions that we can't get into right now. So we definitely want to talk. So Russ has another challenging situation going on, slightly outside the scope of today, but he's just dealing with somebody that it has taken a conversation, unfortunately public, I'm guessing on social media, standing up against having non-believers in the church on the Sunday morning. So this is pretty fundamentally off. The church, I mean, I almost feel like this is like, I can't believe somebody would be having this conversation. We shouldn't have non-believers on a Sunday. So I'm almost at a loss for words on where to start on how bad that is. But I can understand how stressful this can be, Russ. And so again, we could probably have a conversation offline to get a little bit more detail on, what the situation is here, who this person is that you're having this conflict with. But I mean, the first thing that came to mind, honestly, is spiritual warfare. That somebody would be standing up so blatantly against what the church is about or should be about, that you could be looking at the initializations of a cancer in the church if this person has influence and is attempting to spread this false gospel. So, again, we can talk offline. If I'm super open to getting more information about that. So Lowell says, Scott, he's a leader in a church, and the pastor he says, on board with revitalization, but as he put it, is relationally bankrupt in the church community. So may not have the leadership trust to move the church forward. So they're questioning whether they need a senior pastor change before being able to make progress. So
it starts at the top. The leader has to not just mentally say, yeah, I'm for this, but they have to be all about it. They've got to be the one that rallies the troops and says, this is what matters. And, I got to say, send them to this free registration tomorrow, because it's one of the things that I'm reading that comment. If I'm looking like I'm looking away, it's because I'm reading my screen. If he's relationally challenged, so to speak, could be part of his temperament, and he might not be aware of that, right? He might be introverted or something like that. So going and taking that course that we're offering for free has a temperament assessment. And we talk about, what do you do if your temperament doesn't line up for revitalization? How do you mitigate that and manage that? So that might be a good option to say, hey, I went to this webinar, giving away a free course. I mean, literally no strings attached. Check this out.
Mm-hmm. Amanda, yes, there's a website for Church Revitalization University, and we'll have links for you going out tomorrow and then this week with more information. Scott, what role does social media play in revitalization?
It plays the same role that facility changes or anything else plays, which is they are a bit player in a larger scheme. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we'll talk about, the tool. So so long as you're using it in alignment with your overall plan, it can be a really powerful tool. But some churches make the mistake of thinking, man, if we just had a better communication strategy or marketing strategy, we'd be revitalized. It's just one component. So it's an important component, and certainly you should leverage social media. My biggest piece of advice on social media is this. Pick something and do it well. So don't be on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. If you can't do all three really well, pick one, pick Instagram or pick Facebook, and just do it really well. Become an expert in it. Or if you're the pastor, find someone else to become an expert in it, because you don't need to be doing that, managing that. And be great at one thing. Don't be mediocre in three.
Yep. Let's see. So Pat also asked, Pat, that was a question from Pat. Pat also asked, when you draw the line and close a congregation down. So Pat, we mentioned earlier, having a critical mass to go through a revitalization process. So there's not a hard number on that, 30 to 50 people.
Under 30, you got to start going, all right, it's time to think about replanting.
Yeah. So if you're under 30, then there's still other factors involved, age of the congregation, willingness of the congregation. When you're under 30, you're having family discussions about this. Everybody's kind of going to be in on it or not. So
you're less of a church and more of a small group at that point.
That's right. Yeah. So you're discussing this and really gauging people's level of interest at that point. Do you have some suggestions for an older congregation to reach younger people?
Yeah,
that's a big one.
Yes, I do. I've got one big. There's lots of things you could do, but if you could just choose one thing, it would be this: run everything you do through the filter of a young family. Right? Service times, are they at a time that would if your service starts at 11:30, okay, which some churches do, what are you bumping into? Lunch and nap time. Young parents don't want to take their kids to an 11:30 service because the kids are going to miss nap. Those are the kinds of things. So when you say we're going to run everything through the filter of how does this impact families, young families, it changes everything you do. When you look at a room, you go, okay, how is a young family going to react to this room? That would impact the changes you might make. All right, how are we going to communicate this sermon or our announcements? Run that through the filter of how is a young family going to hear this? How is it going to hit their ear? How are they going to experience it? So if you can make the one change where I commit to running everything through the filter of how does this impact young families, that will by default start changing the way you act in a lot of different ways. So instead of thinking, again, this is higher level thinking that we're trying to teach through a strategic envisioning process through what we're doing in the Church Revitalization University, is let's make one change that impacts lots of decisions versus let's try to make 100 different decisions. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So this is a really good and common question. So often I hear only church attendance numbers as indicators for revitalization. What other metrics are there that indicate growth and progress? So Mark, when you go through a revitalization process, you're building a healthy church that has a lot of components to it. Some of the highlights of that are going to be a church that's on mission together, and working through establishing a discipleship pathway in the church that has a very clear and short and simple structure for people moving in progress of transforming their lives by the Holy Spirit into more mature followers of Christ. You're going to see increasing number of people in that pipeline or moving to higher levels of maturity. So and to us, that's way bigger deal than what's the attendance numbers. Attendance numbers, it's a necessary indicator of what's going on in the church. Don't not take attendance. But seeing people progress in their maturity is a bigger deal and a greater output. So that is certainly one there. People serving, which is a component of discipleship pathway. Baptisms is a great one as well. If people are making decisions for Christ, and maybe then joining the church. So, that's great as well. But yeah, attendance numbers, we look at that, but that's not really what we're going for. We're looking at establishing in a church a system in which living out the Great Commission is happening, making disciples of Christ and seeing them become mature. That's
So
the output.
defining a series of steps. So a simple way of saying it is you want to define a series of steps and then measure the percentage of people who are taking the next step. That will tell you, are we moving people along in a discipleship process or not? Now, again, as AJ said, you have to start by defining what that process is, what those steps are. But once you've done that, then it's fairly simple to start measuring, are we moving people along through that process or not?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not, where's the breakdown?
Yep. Do you want to keep going? We're like 2 minutes over. We got still several questions out here that I think are good for people to hear. So
let's just keep answering.
If you guys want to stay on, we'll stay on. So Debbie asked, if our church needs revitalization, do we need to change our name also? No, but maybe. So that's less common. We don't see as many name changes happen in a revitalization process, at least not initially. That sometimes is the church just feels led to do that based on what their vision is for the future. So good case in point, church I just worked with last year. That was not on the table initially, and now they're talking about doing that. They're also talking about moving. So interestingly, this is a church of a couple hundred people a week. They're kind of adopting some replant characteristics. And they're even internally kind of using that language. So that's not really what they're doing. They are continuing in a revitalization. But because now they're becoming a more healthy church and they have a vision that they're going after and a mission of making and maturing disciples, they've decided really where we are is not the place that we really should be. Aging building, way too big for them, costing a fortune. They've decided that they want to relocate not too far away to a place that would be more cost efficient and in a better physical location for them to live out their mission and vision. And as a part of that, they are talking about possibly changing their name. So I wouldn't call that's not common. Your mileage, may vary, but that could happen, but not on that's not where we're starting from. That's a decision that we make later as a result of a vision that we've established. So,
right. So conversely, like the opposite of that is a church that I've been working with, started with wanting to change their name. And I kind of pressed them to, let's not make a decision on a name change until we've done all this other work first. I think they might end up still changing the name, but a name change is another one of those knee-jerk reaction things that we do because if we just change the name, it's going to solve all of our problems. We'd rather deal with those internal systemic issues, cultural issues first. Then if at the end of the day we go, hey, we still need a name change, then you do the name change. But work on the higher level things first, and then let the name change come as a result of that if it's necessary.
So another common one as well, and we talk about this like in our first session with people. The question from Jamie is, should we anticipate resistance from some of the congregation and even some in leadership in seeking a revitalization plan? And do we help deal with that? So the answer is yes. People will push back on it. And some people will leave the church. That just has to be said. That's an unfortunate reality. Whenever prior to a church establishing a unified mission and vision, a church always has a mission and vision. Everybody has their own. So whenever you can show up on Sunday and Wednesday and whatever else you do, kind of operating on your own mission and vision, there's never a conflict. When the church establishes one, a unified one, or at least primarily unified, established, with the leaders are on board, most of the leaders, and, most of the congregations on board, you end up then with people saying, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know that's where we were going. I didn't know that's what we're trying to do. That now is in conflict with me personally. And so how they live that out, I don't know. They might verbally say that's not what they want to do. They might just quietly leave. They might resist. And then with a healthy conversation, I go, oh, now I get it. I'm on board with that. So, there's always, as with anything, there's going to be early adopters. There's going to be, late adopters, and be people that never get on board, and it's time for them to go. That's just the way it is. But yes, we do want to help them work through that as a part of the process. When we work with a church, all of our team meetings, our work sessions that we do as we walk through this on site are open to people to attend. So we encourage everybody come. That never happens. We have 3 to 8 people, maybe, Scott. And usually that's even in the churches where the pastor's like, oh boy, I think we're going to have a ton of people because everybody's talking about this. I'm like, okay, great. We'll print a bunch of copies of the material and put a bunch of chairs out. And there's nobody there. So in the end, usually fewer people care that much about it that they're willing to put a few hours of time in on the weekend to come hear what's going on. But it's there. And if anybody wants to see firsthand how we're working it out, they're welcome to be there. So, and then there's a whole communications thing that you need to be doing on the back end to make sure that information gets put out that's correct. So,
Scott Parker, is this the Scott Parker I know Scott Parker? Wave if it's you, Scott Parker, that I know Scott Parker.
He's waving.
Oh, hi Scott. Good to see you. Good question, by the way, about hiring. He has a question about when do we hire staff. So I'm always slow to hire staff because they're hard to get rid of if you hire the wrong person. So I always encourage, let's do some pipeline work first. So basically we want to know, is our span of control under control? Basically, how many people are reporting to you right now, Scott? And if the answer is more than 8, then you have too many people reporting to you. So the solution to that can be one of two things. Number one, we can invest time, energy, and effort into restructuring our volunteer team so that you have less volunteer people reporting to you. In a church that's growing, you said you're like 170, you're getting about to that size when that might not be possible. Just by restructuring, you might have to hire staff. So, but I always say start with a pipeline. So actually, seriously, contact us. Working with us to work on a pipeline is significantly cheaper than hiring a staff person. And you might come out the other end of that going, we don't need to hire another staff person for another year. And so that, again, wow, that really came across like a sales pitch. Scott, you know me, I'm not trying to sell you anything. But I always start with, let's maximize our volunteer team first, and hire second, because once you hire someone, if it's not the right hire, man, it's hard to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So
since that was already sounding a little salesy, I'll answer Philip's question about, do we have consultants that work on site? Yes, we do. All right. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. And with that, let's finish off our last question on here is really just a statement, but it's a statement of encouragement. So I want to just tell you, Chris said that it does take 3+ years to see deep change. His church now is at the 6-year plus mark, and they're seeing more growth and health than ever. But you have to be committed to the vision and persistent to overcome the challenges. Couldn't have said it better myself, Chris. So I think that's a great way for us to leave off today. Let me remind you again, you can email us, leadership@mountfordgroup.com, and we will take any conversations offline, provide whatever resources we have, and just help you in whatever situation that you're in. You can also join us back here next Tuesday at 10 a.m. on Facebook, on the Mountford Group Facebook page, or the church leadership community, where Scott and I go live for about 20 minutes or so, just talking about another topic in the church. And we're happy to meet you back there.
Replay of this and the link to register for the free course coming out to you tomorrow morning, as early as we're sure that everything is working properly. It's a new website, so we're debugging, but we're very excited about it and can't wait to have it to you tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for joining us for today's webinar. We love you so much. Our heart is for you. We are for you, and we're an advocate for you. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We really love and appreciate you. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks.